I've heard occasionally this thing called manhood. I don't know if I've ever seen it. Maybe I did see it on TV or something. Like, no, not Walker, Texas Ranger. Thinking police TV with Carol. Not really, no, not really. Not a police TV, really. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen it. I don't know. I've heard of it though. It gets tossed around. I know that it's a word that supposedly has meaning. I certainly don't appreciate being told to stand up for myself by devious, snickering, malicious mice in the name of that word. But yeah. Tony Levin thinks he's, Caligula or something. Well, what I thought I'd do is try to piece together a little bit of the impression world around the society of ideas that I've discovered here. Spent the 20th century, instead of protecting public safety, reconciling people's differences, providing for the future, and saving the planet, put together a society of occult ideas for the purposes of the art of war for war's sake. And I'd like to put together some of the nuts and bolts of the social fabric, social um, blue book network that I found, so that you can see how the ideas that I brought forward is to testify to the central theme, which is that John Lennon pulled a Houdini in tandem with the 11th hour rescue of Adolf Hitler that they were calling Casper, as dramatized by King Edward's Hollywood crowd and Veronica Lake's um, passage from This Gun for Hire called um, Now You See It, as they're holding the ace of spades, a symbol of death, and having resurrection scene at the end, back from the dead, to utilize the invisible hand in the fourth dimension. Well, it's clear that that's what happened. I mean, you have to go through a lot of research blog and evidence to identify that that's what really happened. But the ideas had been around since World War One that they used and deployed for this. They have been thinking about doing this for a long time. And the reason I want to use the impressionistic method is that, you know, the things come and go in your memory, I wonder how much grasp I have over my busy research books that I have read and studied and now understand what went on. But there's some elusive connections to track down. I've gotten better at guesswork. For example, there's a really large 1122 billboard out here by Mildred and Pierce Streets, Mildred Pierce Streets in Tacoma. Um, 11 broadcasts, it's on Woodlawn or something, which is where the letters from the Texas School Book came from, written by Gail Burstyn from the Israeli in the Fold, who pulled this. And it's a broadcast, you don't see this 1122, right? So you don't see Mildred and Pierce Street. You don't see, because there's a film called Mildred Pierce. It's film noir with Joan Crawford, who's a relevant figure in what happened. Who's out here is Robert Anton Wilson. He was in the first issue of The Humanist with Auto Crash. Now it's a bisected JFK, from January 1964. Robert Anton Wilson, I took a guess, probably knew Henry Miller, and of course I was right. So we know that Blythe Sanders was probably known to him because Blythe Sanders was a close personal associate of Henry Miller, and he was active back in the 20s. He knew Picasso, Prokofiev, Sergei Eisenstein, D.W. Griffith, probably the Italian futurist. And he lost an arm in World War One, so he had the concept of the invisible hand, and he literally would mix fact and fiction in pseudo exobiographies, and he examined the way that reality could be imposed. It was so conspicuous that a book that just came out about him is called The Invention of Life. He's like Dugin, the Russian philosophical master, believes that belief can be an end in itself. So did Sanders. And so the manipulation, even the use of real crime for entertainment, snuff filmography, is all written into the script of his manias. One of his books sounds like a Ripper Hatter show of the sort that the Manson family put on. So what's going to be entertainment? How's it going to be used? Went into the thinking, the consciousness of these Hatters. Two, I found him. I was looking for somebody who could explain to me. I was having trouble figuring out. I mean, I could see from I did some hard work with research librarians. I went to UW, Tacoma, Seattle University, and Seattle Public Library. And UWT has a woman who's brilliant, and she tracked down a chapter in a Russian avant-garde book about Ouspensky's fourth way psychology. He knew Ouspensky. I believe Sanders must have known Ouspensky, but they both had heard of or knew Houdini. And Ouspensky was working with Prokofiev and Picasso, and Sanders knew Picasso very well. You could see from the cubist images like the icon, and then they tumble away and then return to the icon, the fourth dimensional idea. By the way, this came out because Camelia Valieva gave me a tip when she fell for fourth place in Beijing 2022. So the fourth way Ouspensky, Kharkov, Moscow scene was mingling with the Cubist eccentrics who knew D.W. Griffith, and it was very hard to get. Sanders identified who were the intellectual people putting this together. I mean, knew Henry Bergson was talking about the fourth dimension, and Einstein was fielding early publications of his relativity theory. So you have who are these people? And I found Sanders and Legger, I guess his name is, in the back of in the index of a Cubism book. They didn't have any art attributed to them. So who are these men? They're literary figures. And I also was having trouble understanding where D.W. Griffith touched base with the Cubist movement, because I didn't know that about Sanders yet, Henry Bergson. So the intellectuals behind the fourth dimensional thinking of the Cubist movement. I talked to a professor in South Carolina who told me that Marinetti was a fascist, and the fascists in Italy called themselves futurists, but they were offshoots of the Cubists. They were sort of cubistic themselves. They had the slightly more grandiose deco feel about them, but they were Cubist and they called themselves futurists. So then I found Luigi Freddi, who was in cinema, but he introduced D.W. Griffith to this futurist crowd and to Mussolini in the 20s and 30s when these people were sorting out their plan to operate as an invisible hand behind the scenes to get leapfrog oligarchs super enriched, and then puppet show and make pretend. I mean, that's the whole theme of it. Imagine us, imagine us being able to control people's reality so that they weep and flail themselves over the death of the hero, the fourth dimensional hero, the Superman, P.D. Ouspensky calls it in this book about the Russian avant-garde, Mikhail Laronov or something. And it's published, of course, encrypted by about Parton. and Anthony or something. I mean, they have a publication guild. And you'd have to know what that asshole Tony Levitt did to me to see what he's Dolly Pardoning his arse off about. But they were like, tell them, they'll believe it. They'll believe John Lennon died. They'll believe it. It'll be a super magic show. Houdini will have control of their absolute reality. Their entire belief system will be ours. And they would rather believe that than look at the facts, which is that John Lennon on its way out, on his way in, so to speak, killed JFK, set up Revolution #9 with Martin Luther King stashing him the Texas school book, that he robbed Anton Wilson, Tesseract, and called it double fantasy. And you see it in Ann Mitchell, who was from the Morgan family, used to tell me the Scottish guy, I couldn't stand him. He was always laughing at me. The Scottish guy is laughing at you. You know, the Scott in James Bond's movie, You Only Live Twice, which starred a Japanese woman who stars with a lookalike of Lennon in a 1964 Mothra. It opens with a newspaper. James Bond was killed. And James Bond is the one reading it or something. I mean, you only live twice. Double fantasy. Make it real. So this is the invisible arm, and it's all written by Sanders. And they encrypted it for pornography genocide. Bergson and Sanders both conceived of a biological metaphor in the two-dimensional camera. See, this is a metaphor that you can cut and paste of the third dimension. And then they said, what if you go to the fourth dimension? Then you can cut and paste the third dimension. So people will believe what you tell them is true. Ha 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 ha. Beyond fake news. I mean, it's beyond that. It's manipulation of reality from a hidden hand. And the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz holds Trump. So you have this situation where these people were in place to think about this. Bergson and Sanders believed in the metaphor, the biological metaphor in the machine of the cinema screen. Close-ups were the big deal for D.W. Griffith. And he passed the torch through Alan Dulles to Cecil B. DeMille, another biblicist. Alan Dulles was always called a fascist because he was one. And he was meeting with German high command. He was the highest ranking member of German intelligence to infiltrate Eisenhower's headquarters. And he intervened in Nuremberg for the Gestapo and so forth. I mean, you could just read tons of books about his stuff. He's the one who came up with Oswald. And I mean, even members of the New York Times realized he killed JFK. But he was fascist, not just through his close personal friendship with Adolf Hitler, but who was probably found by that Mickey Mouse dude, Walt Disney. Adolf Hitler, that'd be great. What a great idea. So, it's the way he would probably, I mean, Donald Duck does this. You can see the cartoons in the old YouTube reruns. If you put in Donald Duck swastika, you'll find this thing. So, but he was also fascist he put Cecil B. DeMille in charge of Radio Free Europe. But D.W. Griffith was, of course, known to have created the Burning Cross for the KKK. He's the first person who used it for the KKK. And then his assistant director, Raoul Walsh, made Reagan's wartime films with Errol Flynn, who was meeting with Hitler, and it's full of pro-Axis symbolism. And he lived in Laurel Canyon with Houdini. Errol Flynn did. And so he and Reagan were masterminding the plan for the Kennedy assassination and the rise of Casper, the friendly fascist. So D.W. Griffith was meeting with, Marinetti introduced Mussolini to Italian society. And Luigi Freddi was one of their, cameramen, all fascinated with cinema. And of course, these people saw the most beautiful women can be caught on film. So what you do is you create a metaphor for the parochial search for the soul that's recorded, and create a metaphor system to bamboozle the intelligence system. And behind the scenes, flip from King Crimson, this stuff goes back to the Lumiere brothers who first created cinema. Flip behind the scenes introduced me to a friend of Ouspensky, so it's all part of this Gurdjieff cult, who would say, "Oh no, we're not entertainment. This is not entertainment." So they had planned, the shock and awe of discovering that the things we were laughing about and putting on were our hell fiends after to gobble your souls. I mean, this is the society that put together the double cross. I mean, it's all in the cinema's semiotics. You can read about it and see the examples I found. The Clock Two Virgins Pussy Ball, eugenic word game, where the black man conquers the Japanese symbol of life, yada, yada, yada. Penis Gabriel was pulling strings to get this all played out. As a linguistic anthropology word game overlapping the AIDS attack. And the pornography genocide is all encrypted in the Texas school book script, Nabucco's stupid code, it calls it. They gassed me in Kings Estate in the Holocaust survivors experiment when I was tortured and kidnapped as a child, and they have a C and a Star of David, a copyright. C and a Star of David is symbol for the Neva Corporation, who is named in the script, and uh, the symbol is they gassed me in a place called King's Estate, and the letters come from Israel. It's a C and a Star of David. And that explains why the Green Party in Seattle Ripper murdered Shannon Harps. We already knew over the penny line. The C is a copyright. If you make money off this, you die. We'll inject you. They have the Black Panthers allied with this dude who was extolling Joseph Goebbels, a white racist, in the name of saving the earth, the Green Party. Isn't that neat? And he surrounds my name with positive and negative signs. So if you get a penny, you get positive. And Moon Unit Zap and draws this stuff about it, and it's all based on the Ono's claim Lana died, and Bacon was really sharp. But his attorneys had me in D.C. today. He claims he's shot. He comes out and waves to me, and they give me a brochure. There's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes. The jury believes in virginity proves rape, so they castrate me and rape a deaf girl, and that's feminism. And no, it's feminazi, they call it in Samuel. So you have, this idea that it's irrelevant that they graffiti don't know who, injecting people values, parochial values, on the German Green Party on the back of my father's obituary. My father was notorious for being outspoken about his loathing of Germany because of World War II. He wouldn't even fly through their airspace, and they'd get the last laugh at the German Green Party. And because he's white, professor of liberalism, the Black Panthers don't like him. So the German with the injection comes and he says, "I'm Joseph Goebbels. I'm leading the JDL to prove the virginity proves rape." And the Black Panthers think I'm just wonderful, and that's the way it plays out in Seattle. Seattle's so brilliant. UW Electrical is so brilliant. So you have the situation with the script, and they say that it's irrelevant that Yoko Ono would have a revenge motive for my father over Hiroshima. Endure the unendurable is what Emperor Hirohito was called. They put together the bullet train in 1964. There's a Japanese man who follows Jack Ruby around the Dallas Police Department, and he's standing outside Dallas Police Department on the nuclear bunker side when Death Cab for Cutie comes out. And when Oswald's the vehicle takes him into the morgue, comes out of the police station. They shot him in the basement of the police department. And had a stage for a Japanese man. Now, a little boy from Japan is in Dealey Plaza the next day being photographed. So, what they did, that was a little girl very close as an observer. They put it on the cover of Sergeant Pepper's, blew his mind out in a car, the Carousel Club, boop, 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 for the benefit of Mr. Kite. And they released the White Album on November 22nd, 1968, after Prague Spring, when they killed Martin Luther King, JFK. White was supposedly for mourning, but it sounded like morning zapped and right between the odds, zap. So you see, they put this whole thing together to laugh. and it's really creepy. You will believe it. You will. And if you don't believe it, you're the man with the invisible arm that's going to grab you by the throat, and you'll be really sorry, horrible. They brutally tortured me. But they've been wrapped up. If you read Blood Senders, people um, to read yet. I haven't gotten a chance to. Offshoots of this crop. But if you read Blood Senders, you could see that he was well traveled and he wrote um, Manson-esque Ripper celebrations of reckless abandon in the manner of pushing the limits of the imagination and the morbid fascination that became Hollywood, gore films. And I grew up near George Romero, who made Night of the Living Dead, and this thing merged investigating a war game clock to the AIDS attack. I mean, it gets pretty ugly. You know, Pittsburgh is pretty disgusting place in that way, but it wasn't just Pitt. I mean, Pitt. It wasn't CMU, Church Military Union. George Bush put together as an apocalyptic sadist like the Sea and the Star of David. It's just a military nutshell. Israeli intelligence reflecting the flags and the spires of St. Paul's Cathedral, the synod of which, of course, the Gurdjieff Society would meet. And these Gurdjieff Society people wheedled the deed to Paul Runko and Greg Coral in Highland Park, who, exposed me to King Crimson as a child while living with Elizabeth Blumenfeld's neighborhood and Todd, whose father appears mysteriously on my father's George Leader book, he died shortly after that. Todd was working with Celine Dion, whose part of Peter Sinfield put out this celebration of domestic abuse called Think Twice. Think twice before you walk out on me, like I'll bash you is the impolite thing. Open your box, baby. And then they say that I am abusive for leaving a girl untouched and simply crying because of her rejection. I mean, it's devious. It's really devious. And what they are women who get vicarious thrill out of seeing other women raped. Celine Dion got vicarious thrill out of seeing Cersei Kennedy murdered and Duff Genie raped. And they ignore that Yoko Ono had a motive. My father was in Bush's ship off the coast of North Japan, and in the radio room he could be heard. And they put out the song called That Voice Again, alluding to me because they had invited me and insinuated themselves into my life, writing to me and stuff. This Amanda Harcourt woman is responsible for the deaths of all of these Kennedys. She makes genocide pornography. Peep, peep, you don't like that, do you? Well, they deserved it, didn't they? And then she says, "Oh, we represent hair. What hair has a mushroom cloud, and it's old posters." John and MK Ultra appear in one of Believers. You could see Believer on the ice. It says John and MK. MK Ultra was the brutal pimp show that came in legendary for making drug slaves of the people who followed John Lennon. And then they turned to these Swami Nostras from Robert Anton Wilson's Anarchic Harmony. We're going to balance the hemispheres. We're going to balance the hemispheres in a hybrid Xania show. We'll kill this one, we'll kill that one. And then we'll clear the air that way. Oh, aren't Ringo Starr neat? And this lookalikes of Richard, Queen Elizabeth's cousin, at the scene of Reagan, at the scene of Sean Strub and Mark Chapman. And the three of them are part of an archetype system that Tamo DeJong of King Crimson and Dugan believe is the reality show from the fourth dimension, which we identify with archetypes. And it's our archetype that matters. Of course, the oligarchs are like, I am the archetype, so I matter. And they don't care about the rest of us, but they make us care about them. There was some turkey at the um, T-Mobile Stadium with this T-shirt, "Worship it is what we are meant to do." You know, that dude, I forget his name, Jordan Peterson, I think his name is, says, "Well, when I go out they come to hear me speak as a form of worship. That's based on hearing a sermon." You know, and he doesn't he expects you to will back at that. He says no, you know. It's like another character says, "No, I believe your brain should be washed, should be cleansed." You know, the thing is whether you like disturbing subversion of the dominant paradigm, CMU feminazis and dialectical intelligence people like to say when promoting the Axis revenge system of Ono against a Peace Corps leader. My father was a school bus driver. My father was. I mean, human rights author. My father was. Um, the truth is it's reasonable to question whether we really go out and worship, you know, people that we elect or are forced by culture to follow rules laid down by. You know, it may feel like we worship them, and that feeds into the fourth dimension. But sometimes people learn things that cause them to second guess the people they believed in. So controlling people's belief system is really important to this idea of worshiping them. You know, so I don't know if our intellectual society has properly put together um, the academic issues that are contingent on a proper evaluation of this school of nuisance characters from, after all, blood and guts Hollywood. I mean, who pimped their way into some sort of master plan.